if you have that thought that you may need to defend your life for those you love, you should probably start on that path right now. The moment you have that inclination that it's time to, look into this kind of thing, you should probably do it. And you shouldn't expect to be, a Grandmaster USPSA shooter in 2 weeks, right? I've said before, and I teach all the students that go through my class that transformation is a process, right? It's not an event. You're not going to be able to go away from one class being able to shoot sub 2 seconds at 25 yards at an A zone. You can't get too wrapped around the axle about getting everything right the first try.
If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and consider, for a very small fee if you're able, to become a paid subscriber on defenders-live.com. Your support is the only way I'm able to continue doing this labor of love. And also, if you're looking for exceptional firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and look at the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. Brent Hickmon is the owner of Haven Defense Company, a family-owned holster manufacturing business started in 2016. He's also a certified firearms instructor for Defenders USA and is now their lead handgun instructor for Western Colorado. Brent has trained with many instructors and earned numerous instructor certifications. Most recently, he's trained with Tim Herron, AJ Zito, and Riley Bowman in a 3-day pistol craft workshop, which we'll be discussing later in the episode. And then earning a 3/4 black belt patch in Scott Jedlinski's Red Dot Fundamentals Instructor Certification. He's also a certified advanced and master level instructor with Rangemasters legendary Tom Gibbons, where he won the coveted Top Gun Award in that program. So what does this all mean? Brent is a student of the craft, and he spent plenty of time and money dedicated to education in order to help his students. I also know that Brent is passionate about helping people become defenders of life. And my impression is that he has a deep-rooted sense of personal responsibility, not only to those that he loves, but to his business and those that he serves through Defenders USA. He's a good friend, and I'm proud to know him. Let's welcome Brent Hickmon onto the show. Hey, Brent.
Hello. How are you?
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
So to start off, I noticed in your bio that you gave me, you say that you're the lead handgun instructor for Defenders USA in Western Colorado. And I'm like, that sounds really good. Does that mean I'm the lead handgun instructor in Montana? Because I should put that on my bio.
I think so. I don't know. I just kind of threw that in there for myself.
That's a good way of explaining it.
Yeah, because I think out of all the instructors we have, I tend to do the most. So not to disparage anybody else within Defenders, right? I'm probably the one with more time to do it, so I do it, and I just feel the most passionate about it. So yeah, like you said, as long as we're as instructors striving to learn as much as we can to impart that on our students, I think that's what makes you a good instructor. So that's what I try to achieve.
Yeah, and that's why I pointed out to everybody, instead of just reading this long list of credentials, and it's much longer than what I read, I wanted to make sure I pointed out the reason you're doing it isn't so that you look good on paper. The reason you do it is so you can help serve others better. Plus, it's really fun to watch your videos. I'm not going to lie, as you're really good and you've legitimately worked for it. And so it's always fun to watch somebody who's worked really hard for something do well. Thanks. So let's start off with this 2-day practical performance class and maybe the Jedi class. And then later we'll go into, you have developed a new class for Defenders USA that we want to talk about.
Yep.
But you've taken a lot of classes, but what was it about this? Now explain the practical performance class with Tim Herron and then that one you did with Riley, AJ, and Tim.
Yeah.
What was different about those?
Those were different in the sense, as far as my own personal training journey, those were specifically about competition shooting.
Okay.
Stage planning, and because I've started doing more competitions, so it helped my own skill set develop, because I'm not peaked out on stand and deliver drills, but not that they're boring, but
sometimes
competition's kind of the next step as far as my skill set. I've found that I tend to almost revert back to some older training and skill set when I start a competition and shoot it, about halfway through, then I'll figure out, okay, I need to get more support hand grip in there. It
So
just
you're
helps.
saying you like go back into a default mode of what you
Yeah,
used to do? So
yeah,
so
because we've
explain that. What's an example of what you used to do that you're trying to like learn not to do anymore?
So one of the things that we used to do is like grip the tar out of the gun with both hands. And then after doing some stuff with Riley and AJ and Tim in that 3-day, I kind of learned that you don't need to put in that much grip strength into your gun as we have been teaching before. So it's more about support hand grip. And I just tend to revert back to both hands gripping hard as needed, when it's all realistically your support hand that needs to grip the gun.
Sorry, go ahead.
And the structure of your grip, how you're gripping it, matters as far as where Adam calls it the touch mapping, right?
You said something about touch mapping the way that you put your hand on the gun. Could you repeat what you said about that?
Your grip structure is more important to have the structure right versus being super strong on it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So you
Totally.
don't have to grip a gun as hard as one thinks because of the mechanics of the gun, how the slide cycles and all that. That's an assist in your recoil management, and few people know that. And I also learned with Scott that trigger manipulation also is part of your recoil. So if you pin the trigger to the rear, it sets the weight of the gun and everything to the rear, so that when it recoils, it's going to snap back and then not actually settle forward where it should. But if you
that makes sense.
While you're in recoil, it'll kind of snap off the trigger, and it'll come back to that prep. Not the wall per se, but right before the prep, it'll start to settle back to where it lifted from. Instead of high, it'll settle level.
Yeah, that makes
really
sense.
interesting. I didn't understand that or realize that until he pointed it out.
That's good. I think people often ask the question, how hard should I grip the gun? I've gotten that question in my classes before, and I don't know who I stole it from, or maybe I made it up in my head. Honestly, I don't know where it came from. I want to say it was Riley Bowman. I always say, and you probably do too, like, how hard do you grip a hammer? You grip it hard enough, however hard it needs to be gripped in order for it to not fall out of, or, come out of your hand when you use it. The same with a gun. And I have not met anyone who's under gripped a gun ever in my life. I've only ever met anyone who's over gripped a gun, because especially women are just like shaking gripping the gun, usually whenever they're using it. So I don't think that.
Especially new people I have found, because they're scared of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So naturally they're going to grip it harder. Yeah.
Natural response.
So balancing out those pressures is really, I think, the key to what we need to teach them, rather than just all out strength.
So when it comes to for me, I have learned for myself and through some teaching of other people to try it out. If you input the thought process of 100% support hand, 0% dominant hand grip, firing hand grip, they'll tend to equal out and be even, because this is your dominant hand. Your dominant hand it already wants to take over without thought. It's automatic. But if you put it in your brain that I'm shooting with my support hand only, my firing hand's job is to get the gun out and press the trigger. That's it. Gripping the gun is with my support hand. And that's how I achieved a 193 bill drill in front of Scott Jedlinski.
Sweet.
So I did one, and it was kind of screwed up because he tends to give everybody some practice all together, and then he'll run down the line and give you 2 individual time runs, and then your fastest is your fastest. And you also get 2 mulligans for that too. So if you flub your draw, you're good. You can redo it. But the first attempt was like a 208 or 215, something like that, and 1 round out. And then I had to calm myself down and be like, okay, I'm only driving the gun and gripping the gun with my support hand. And then everything was boom, right there as it should have been. And that freed up my trigger finger to basically move as fast as it wanted to.
And some of the stuff that we're talking about today is a little bit more advanced than the beginning level shooter. And even though I really think anybody could watch this and get something out of it, or at least get curious about it and go, oh, I think maybe I should look into that more, or I've never heard that before, or maybe I should get some training and learn more. But I wanted to ask you, what is because I totally have lots of mental hangups when I'm shooting or when I'm doing a performance of any kind. What is your biggest mental hang up or struggle that you deal with because, we talk a lot about the physical, the technique of everything and what you learned there, but what have you learned about yourself, what your mental process is?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned, especially in the last few classes, because they are more performance based, outside the skill set that I've already kind of developed and worked on, is to trust yourself and trust your body to do what it does. Like Scott specifically told me off to the side once, he's like, look, man, you're already fast. You don't have to try. Just do it. Like, because there was a few instances where I would try too hard, and that's why I missed the bill drill for that 3/4 patch. I did the rest because I'm so used to draw to first shot times and all that stuff. But the bill drill is one of his harder of the 4, and I put too much tension in and did quite poorly, actually. Even Miles was there with us, right? And he's like, dude, that was the worst bill drill I've seen you try. So
yeah,
for me, I think I just need to, as far as a mental level, need to calm down and realize that I don't have to rush because I've already built all the automaticity of going fast. And I think that applies to a lot of really high-end shooters when they get to a class like Scott Jedolinsky's Modern Samurai Project, when they're trying for to get that black belt patch and they let it get to their head and they try too hard. That's my opinion, because that's what happened to me.
That is so common too. I mean, I don't care what you're doing. It seems like that if you've put in the time to develop some subconscious competence in anything in life, that the minute that you try thinking about it too much, we call that overthinking, getting in our own way. I'm really good at that. And there are few people who can help me get out of my own way. Adam is one of them. Sometimes he gets in my way on purpose, but sometimes he's really good at helping me get out of my own way. And Brian Hill's really good to help me do that. And I've noticed that as I've trained with more and more people, there are certain trainers who have that ability to see that in someone and somehow are able to help them navigate getting out of that frontal cortex, and working more from a flow state. And then there's others that actually make it worse for me. So I think that's really interesting, depending on who you're working with or who you're around. And again, that would go back to like who you surround yourself with, right, is really important. So
I think that also, that whole concept of trying to get into the flow state is relative to staying process focused instead of outcome focused. So because we teach that a lot, right? And that's kind of what happened to me on the bill drill, because I smoked the first 2. I wasn't even trying. Then I was like, okay, I got 2 more. This one.
You thought about it. Yeah.
This one's the hardest. And I actually hadn't done one in practice under him yet, in under 2 seconds for that black belt standard. Yeah. So I got sucked into the outcome of it and wasn't process focused. So I gripped it too hard with both hands and got some trigger freeze and screwed it all up. Right.
Yeah.
So
learning opportunity, right?
Oh yeah.
And doesn't Jedi talk about the cougar? Doesn't he?
Yes.
Can you describe that for people who've never heard that?
So it's kind of like what I said about trying too hard. Basically.
Go faster. Go faster. That's what the cougar says, right?
And that's what the cougar says. So when you don't need to go faster, you're already fast enough, right? So especially within the standards. So because I was doing the 3-2, which is 3 to the body, 2 to the face at 3 yards. And I was doing that in like 1.75. And on day 2, I tried too hard and I had a whole third of a second to like make sure I was aimed in right. And I shot 2 under the box, but they were touching each other, right?
Yeah.
They were a half inch below touching each other. I was like, well, there goes that black belt attempt.
So you let the cougar get in the way, I guess. Is that what you would say? Yeah.
So I let the cougar get in the way on that attempt on day 2, but the first day I just was outcome focused instead of process focused. So
yeah, it's hard. I get it. That's still insanely fast, Brent. I mean, insanely fast. You're one of the fastest guys I know out of the holster. It's really fun to watch. So, because I want people to know a little bit more about your thinking behind what it means to be a defender. We've had you on before and you've talked about the righteous beast, which I love. And I just want to know like your motivation and your thinking behind why. I mean, we're switching from competition shooting now to more defensive defender stuff. It's all really the same thing, because if you're good in competition, you're a good shooter, period. It doesn't matter. But what's the other component of being a defender besides being a good shooter that I think what Defenders USA represents and the mission behind Defenders USA is that we have to have the right heart, the right mindset, and the right preparation in order to be a defender? What does that mean to you? And how do you help people become defenders?
So I started kind of in my classes giving a little bit of a but a little spiel about how your skill set should dictate the level of interference in a situation. So And we talk about that. I talk about that a lot in my Decisional Defender class, because making the decision to be a defender is like the number one decision to make.
Right. Then that's made well in advance, right?
Yep. That's kind of like the pre-planning thing. So, for instance, Marissa and I have kind of a subset of plans to, if there's ever an incident where we're all out together, my job is to get them out, and then my skill set kind of dictates that I go back.
When you said them, you mean your family, right?
Yeah, my family. Because realistically, I'm pretty much the only one there to make a difference if needed, in my mindset, right? There could be other people there that are closer, but do they have the same practice and skill set? Because why spend all this time, money, and effort to learn all this and be able to do it if I'm just going to go away when I'm needed most? So for me, it's more as if God picked me that day to handle the problem. Yeah. And I know Adam thinks the same way, right? And some of that mindset has been imparted on me, but now I 100% believe it. So there's no, I mean, I would like to think that I will, stand up and to the call, right? But I don't know for sure. But if you make it up in your mind ahead of time, right, and have some faith in whatever God you believe in, right? For me, if it happens to be the day that I get to meet Jesus, okay, But in the in-between of that, I will have hopefully made a difference of some sort, right? That's kind of where I lie on the whole mindset, is you have to make it up in your heart first, and then you can do the things to get you to that level if you need it. So.
And to me, the word that keeps coming in my mind is willing.
Yep.
So you said, when I'm there, I think that I could do whatever it takes or needed to defend life, which I have no doubt you would, Brent. I just know you would. But the key word there, I think, is, are you willing? Are you willing? I mean, we know you're capable of it, right? We know your skill set, but and I would say that, yes, you are willing. And so whether or not you're willing to step in the gap is really what you have to decide in the beginning. And not everybody is. Not everyone's called to be a defender, and that's fine. That's not, not everyone's supposed to be. But those of us that are called to be protectors and defenders, I think we take it very seriously. At least I can say for myself that I do, and I see that from you, and I see that from Adam. And I think that's part of what sets Defenders USA apart from some other training companies. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. And that's not like, I don't disparage any other training company that's good at teaching individual skills. But at some point, to me, all those skills need to they need to mean something, right? And for people within Defenders, it means, you can shoot competitions and have fun and all that for sure. But if the need ever arises, that's the whole point of all this time spent. Because you don't, like I think I've said it before, like you don't, and Tom Gibbons says it too, you don't get to choose the day, they choose you, right? So, and a lot of those people that were willing to harm innocent people train every day in some sort or fashion. They train how to be criminals. They know. So it's up to us to try to, counteract those forces.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. So when you were talking about, I'm reading some of your notes that you've given me earlier. You said that if you're called to be a defender, it's never too late. So what was that all about?
So if you have that thought that you may need to defend your life for those you love, you should probably start on that path right now. The moment you have that inclination that it's time to, look into this kind of thing, you should probably do it. And you shouldn't expect to be, a Grandmaster USPSA shooter in 2 weeks, right? I've said before, and I teach all the students that go through my class, that transformation is a process, right? It's not an event. Yeah. You're not going to be able to go away from one class being able to shoot sub 2 seconds at 25 yards at an A zone and take down any type of threat or, a competition. So transformation is a process, and you can't get too wrapped around the axle about getting everything right the first try. And it's just like jiu-jitsu or working out every day. You can't expect yourself to do what exactly these grandmasters and black belts and all this stuff do, right? They started at ground zero, so will you.
Yeah, so, totally.
Instead of thinking of that as a hindrance, use it as a motivation, right? Just because you can't do it now doesn't mean you can't ever do it.
And also, it's not checking a box, Brent. Am I right? I think a lot of people think that carrying a gun is like they do this box checking thing where they're like, well, my state requires that I go to a basic handgun class, but I already know everything I need to know. I just need to take that class so I can check the box, so I can go get my permit so I can carry my gun. And that's kind of sad to me, because for me anyway, being a defender and a protector of life is a decision, but it's a discipline, really. It's a lifestyle and a discipline for me that I chose long ago and continue to hone. And it's a never ending thing. You talked about working out or any other thing like jujitsu that you work at. You develop a discipline behind learning that. And it becomes a part of who you are. It's not a box you check and then like you're good to go. That's just not how life works. And you talked earlier about transformation. I'm curious, are there any examples in your own life of transformation that you've gone through, or any kind of like earlier in that transformation, were you frustrated because you thought maybe you could just pick up a gun and shoot and develop quicker than you thought you could in the beginning, or any other kind of transformation?
Not as far as shooting.
Yeah.
I'm the type of person, I think, that understands that
good things take time.
Everything that you want that's good in life will take time.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's interesting because I think I stole that transformation is a process, not an event, from some random reel or YouTube clip about faith in Christ. So, and it was very similar to that. So, and that's a new journey for our family too. So maybe that's probably the newest one that we're working on as far as transformation, to be more like Christ.
Yeah.
Not to try to put religion on anybody, but that's kind of where, for me, I think that might be one I'm working on right now. So, because we're all, flawed people. We all have our things, right? So we're all on a path.
Yeah. You know what I love about gun training in this show is that literally everything I've learned about gun training and the process of learning it applies to everything else in my life.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that so much until I started this show, started interviewing people, and I kept hearing these same themes over and over again. And I'm like, wait, that applies to my fitness journey. Wait, that applies to my spiritual journey. And I think that's so cool because honestly, Brent, it's really all the same thing, right? It's all a transformation. It's a process. It's not a destination. It's not an event. It's not a check the box. This life that we live is a constant growth process if we choose for it to be, right? If we put in the work and the time that we're willing and curious, it doesn't matter. You can just fill in the blank as to what that might be in your life. And I don't know why I get so excited about that. I'm like, it feels like I tapped on to something, right? Something that's real and something that's true whenever that happens. And so I get weirdly excited.
I think it is true.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that because another thought I had on the whole process stuff and transformation and, having something that, you get tied up on that's making you kind of frustrated with your path or whatever. I used to do oil painting a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was kind of like when I went to high school, art was my thing, right?
I didn't know that.
There's a painting right back there that I painted a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
But looking back at some of the things I painted in high school, and then the most recent things that I've painted, I haven't painted in like 3 years now because of the business and training and stuff, but because I have to make money somehow, right? Feed the kids. Painting is also a process too. There's layers to everything, right?
Yeah.
And it translates just like shooting. There's layers to your grip. There's layers to your sight picture or movie. There's all sorts of layers to things. So it correlates.
That's really good. That's really good. I learned something new about you, Brent. I did not know that you had that talent as well. So that means possibly you should apply your painting skills to your holster business, and you could turn that business into like next level. Maybe.
Oh, I've tried it.
No, people don't pay for that.
No, and it is very, very time consuming.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think Adam has one or had one with the old Defender logo painted on it.
Oh, cool. Okay,
yeah, I don't do that no more.
That's okay. Some things are not consistent with being a good financial idea. I get that in business. So let's switch gears here to your new class. So you developed a new class called Decisional Defender.
Yep.
Right? And tell us about when you started teaching that class and where you came up with the idea and what people can expect from that class.
So I've technically only taught one class of it. so far because it's that new. So there are some, iterations to be had that'll probably change. I think the next one's in October, the second weekend of October in Cameo, Colorado, and that's already listed on the website. So there will be a few different things that I do in that. But I kind of came to it I did some image-based decisional drills with Brian Hill at the Active Self-Protection Conference a couple of years ago. Have you ever you've had Shelly on here doing...
Yeah, image-based decisional drills.
Yeah.
Yeah, she put me through it on the show.
Yeah.
I think I failed.
some of that was inspired. Some of the Decisional Defender was inspired by that. But this one's my version is slightly more rudimentary in the images because I'm trying to get as many repetitions of changing decisions or changing how, what the visual representation is and what you're going to do about it. So some of them are non-lethal options. We do a little bit of palm work on day one after we've done our live fire sessions. And even the beginning day, I work a little bit on fundamentals if I need to. So I get people shooting, up to speed on stuff. But there is a prerequisite to be able to shoot an 8-inch circle at 10 yards untimed.
Oh, yeah, that's probably good.
Just because I don't want to hold up the whole class and process too much. But as long as you can be safe with a gun, you could kind of sign up for it because I tend to teach to the student as much as possible. But it came from Brian Hill stuff and Shelly Hill stuff a little bit. And then I tried to kind of make it my own because it makes sense to me that in the defensive encounter of your life, you're not going to have a timer. You're not going to have that beep.
Right.
So all of it is based on visual cues and identifiers, but they're not as complex as the image-based decision drills. They're not pictures of things. So I'll show you kind of what I've got here. So part of the class, I'll do red cards to signify it. This is kind of pink. This would be a red card. And then I'd come between two shooters and flash this card up, and they have to visually identify that that's a threat, right? And then shoot their target. And then the other stuff that I try to do is, I unintentionally made this really good for competitive shooting on accident. Because I figured out that, especially after taking those competitive classes, that visual focus shifting is like highly, highly important. Because you have to be able to pick a spot on the target. And then once you've done with that, you have to be able to shot call your sight picture and movie to know that you've made your hits good and move on to the next thing and shift focus to the next target. With that said, some of these visual cards are very simple, right? But I flash them very quickly, and every student on the line's got to make a very quick decision on whether they're going to use a lethal threat option, which is probably their gun, right? Or if it's a non-lethal threat, they can use their palm inert sprays that I got from Palm on the target itself, so that they can actually use a non-lethal threat and lethal threat option in the same scenario. So, because if you're going to be carrying that stuff on you, you need to be able to, in my opinion, be able to distinguish the two, right?
Yeah.
So day one, we do a little bit of palm work on each other after I've made everybody safe, downloaded so nobody accidentally pulls guns on anybody, right? And then day two, we eliminate the palm work on each other and just do it on the target.
And it's all inert spray, right?
Yeah, it's all inert spray.
Okay. And also to be clear, you're not standing in between the shooter and the target holding up a card, right? Okay, let's I know that, but I want to make sure everybody else knows that too.
And then I've also added a cell phone image because under stress and that kind of stuff you can potentially make mistakes, right? So these are very rudimentary pictures and flashcards, but I think they do a really good job of distinguishing the difference of threat, non-threat, maybe it's not a threat at all. And then the thing with decision making too is that fist picture that I have, that could be a lethal threat for somebody as well, right? So disparity of force. Disparity of force is is part of the decision making process too.
Right.
So if, say, our friend Dave, who's taken this class before, and Laura from AGAG, they were both in this first iteration. There was a few times where Dave decided he'd spray his non-lethal threat guy, and then Laura was deciding to actually shoot the non-lethal fist because technically it could be a lethal threat for her. So
yeah, that's really good because when we're on the line and there's a beep, we're not really making any decisions about use of force at all, unless we have a shoot or no shoot. But that is after we already have the gun out. That's a different decision. So what we're doing is we're deciding before what tool are we using And we have to make that decision quickly because, as you and I know, in self-defense, there's not a lot of time to think about these decisions. So this is a way to not only have some stress inoculation, but have some cognitive processing going on. And probably, I'm assuming, by the end of day 2, when you're done with everybody, can you see a distinct difference between their decision-making, how quickly they can do it in the beginning versus the end of the class?
Yeah, like on day 2, I actually will speed up how fast I flash cards. And that I do a lot of walking when I do this.
Yeah.
Like I'll go up and down. But part of the process is these backsides of these represent a no shoot, right? Or it's no longer a threat, right?
Yeah, because that can change. Yeah.
Yeah. So beforehand in a lot of the fighting handgun stuff with Adam, we teach to vary your strings of fire and shoot until you've mentally decided that the threat is done, right? And nothing against that at all. That's part of where this whole thing came from for me, was kind of made more sense to me to have somebody else tell me when the threat was done, because Mr. Bad Guy is the one that decides that he's either stopping or not, right? So I'll flash this guy up to people, and then while they're shooting, I'll flip it, and that indicates that they need to stop shooting, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't have $4,000 or whatever to make, dropping targets and that kind of stuff. So
do you ever change it from a lethal to a non-lethal threat?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I've done that, and I found that really interesting, because the first 4 or 5 times I did it, people would get their palm spray out and start just trying to spray, and then I'd flip it on them, and then they would take a full,
they'd put their palm spray back.
Seconds to go put their palm spray and get their gun out. So I was like, coaching moment.
Kidding. Wow.
Right. If it suddenly becomes a palm or lethal threat, drop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And something else I do a few times on the drill is I use these little guys. It's a 3D printed, pretty much exact size of like a smartphone before they made them bigger.
Yeah.
Right. So I hand these out so they don't have to do anything with their real phones, but they'll pretend that they're preoccupied phone, like everybody does. And then I will flash some sort of threat indicator at them, and then whether or not they figure out to drop the phone or get to what they need to, or that kind of stuff. So
that's good stuff.
That was kind of theft from Brian Hill as well, because he has a drill that involves that specifically.
Well, you have to put the phone up to your ear, don't you?
Yeah,
you gotta drop it and shoot. Yeah.
But for me, hardly anybody is talking on their phones anymore. They're all doing their Facebooky, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes sense to me to do more so this. I give people the option; they can talk on the phone or pretend they're scrolling, because that forces you to be a little bit more cognitively aware of your surroundings.
Right.
So, because some people just stare at their phones, don't know what's going on around them.
Right. Well, that's really good practice.
If we can get people out of that mindset.
That's going to be tough.
And then another thing that I try and get people to do in the class is we do a little bit of verbal command work with our guns on. There's part of it where it gets a little bit kind of funky, because you do get to yell at each other. Then also there will be drills where you'll be doing live fire, and I'll give you a non-lethal threat option, and you have to verbally try and stop them, because that's another thing people are
de-escalate, right?
Yeah, some de-escalation. Or if it's not even, we do talk about de-escalation techniques a little bit, just as kind of a conversation. But when we're on the line, if you've decided to draw your gun to the low ready, say, but you're not quite ready to shoot somebody,
you need to talk.
You need to forcibly make them stop some way.
Right.
I prefer, for me, it makes more sense to be able to draw your gun and not shoot it if you don't have to.
Right.
Than to shoot it, because that will, everybody knows, and we teach it too, that shooting people will change your life forever.
Right.
And even depending on the laws of your state and that kind of thing, drawing a gun could or could not end up in a legal charge for you, right? But to me, it makes more sense to be able to draw the gun and show a threat of force, and
but
maybe
not have to use it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And in some states, isn't it true that you can't even do that, though? Because then that's brandishing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So you have to know your laws.
Yeah, you have to know your laws and that kind of stuff. But the lesser of two evils, too.
Right.
There have been, I don't remember the stats on it, but I know that because it's not something that they can track, right? But how many times have a gun saved a life that wasn't ever fired? Like a ton. Because they're not a trackable thing. Like, nobody reports that stuff. So, but you have to be able to know how to do it also.
Okay, just for those that are like, they're watching and they're like, oh, they've never even heard of this kind of training, even though they're kind of wrapping their heads around it going, I think I know what he's talking about. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Give us an example of like a verbal interaction with somebody that is an unknown contact, somebody that just walks up to you and you don't know if you need to use, you just don't know who they are. You need to determine. So that's what we call managing an unknown contact, right?
Yeah.
And then what would happen and how that would change if that turned into somebody who's trying to do you harm, how that would change.
I think that depends on your skill set, really.
Okay.
And how much you don't want to draw on somebody that isn't quite to that level.
Right. That's why we need to use our words, right? To determine.
So you can, like, what is the saying? Ask, tell, make.
Ask, tell, make, yeah.
For me, the make would be that portion of maybe you have to draw to a low ready, and then they might figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So make would be that, and then possibly force them to stop would be actually shooting them.
But what is the steps before that?
It kind of depends on your distance too, right?
Right.
So some of this practice we do is within 5 yards, drawing on them or drawing to a low ready may be okay, right? Because it's a closer distance. But some of the things you would do is say, if they're within 7 yards of you and they ask you, hey man, you got a light or whatever, you got $5 and you're just not feeling it, that twinge in the back of your neck tells you something's up with this, right? And then it kind of depends on where you're at, your location, the time, all that kind of stuff too. But you would just say, no, I'm good. I don't have any money right now. And if it's forced more, maybe possibly you actually give them $1. Yeah. Or you set the dollar, yeah, I'll help you out, but can you stay back? I'm going to put the $1 bill over here, the $5 bill over here on this trash can. If you just stay there, I'm not very comfortable. Don't be afraid to be rude either. But if you can be kind, you don't want to escalate something that's unnecessary either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's going to be dependent on a lot of scenarios and situations. And then the next thing is don't be afraid to raise your voice, right? Yell at people if necessary.
Women have a hard time with that one in class.
Yeah. And then we do some of that. I'll have people yelling at targets. Mm-hmm. As weird as that sounds, but some people just don't have it in their mindset that they can raise their voice at people. And it is a little bit awkward when you're out there on the range yelling at you need to back up. I swear, I've already asked you to back up, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's funky, but if you don't ever do it, you won't ever do it.
Right.
Like in the moment.
Right.
And there's a few instances of people, becoming a victim because they were too afraid of seeming rude or seeming like a racist, or the twinge in the back of their neck went off and they didn't do anything about it because they were worried about their own impression.
Right.
What other people thought of them.
Yeah.
If I can help people kind of break out of that when it's necessary, without having to shoot people and take life or harm others.
That's ideal.
That's ideal and important too.
Yeah. And I just want to say for myself, like, finding my voice, it sounds like you said really weird, but practicing that on a range, as weird as it sounds, but finding my voice for me on a range was really important. And I think in some small way, I was able to prove to myself that I could do that, like, because I'd just literally never done it before. And it was really awkward, but I did it anyway. Steve? I've done it with Adam and I've done it with Steve. Yeah. Okay. And then at the Girl in a Gun National Conference, when I did the John Holshin class, there was that. And then also with Chuck Haggard. Mm-hmm. So I've had multiple times where I've practiced that now. And now it's not as big of a deal for me. But I really do think, maybe it's just me, but it seems as though women have a really hard time vocalizing. Really getting loud and being clear about their boundaries, I think that could be one of the very best things to learn. And that, okay, it costs you the gun class with Brent Hickmon, the Decisional Defender class. But that's a very small price to pay to gain this skill and information and knowledge that could literally save your life.
Right.
And it's a small thing, but it's important.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, I've kind of catered it and designed it so that you're doing both, right? You're shooting, you're mixing it up, right? Because you don't know what you're going to need to do in the event, right? So if I mix it up, it forces you to, process that information and make those decisions. Yeah. So I'll try to, progress the class as far as, like, we'll do flashcards, then we'll work on some poem, and then we'll do verbal drills where you're yelling at each other so you can get what it's like to be yelled at and to yell at a physical person. And then we'll go to the targets where it's kind of past the point of asking, right?
Yeah.
So now you're kind of working on ask, tell, make. You're making them
Mm-hmm.
at that point before you have to force them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll mix it up as far as all of them kind of interleave together. So
and let's be clear with the audience too.
Yeah.
Your best option for self-defense is to not be in a self-defense encounter in the first place. So if you can get away from that and escape, that is your best option. Or to be able to see it coming and avoid it. Those are your two best options.
You made a lot of mistakes if you get into the situations where we're kind of training in this class.
Right.
That there's a lot of layers to that too.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff can be taught in a classroom, right?
Yeah.
So this is more on the lines of you've made a bunch of mistakes and now you have to figure out like
your stuff,
what you can do, what you're gonna do with your gun on you. Because that's another thing that I find could be a potentiality is like just because you have your gun on doesn't mean you need to use it.
Right.
So if you don't get those reps in and a little bit of practice on, yes, I have my gun, yes, I have my palm, I have these defensive tools, but that doesn't mean I have to use them. So
I should avoid using them if you can.
This
last resort, right?
Yeah, it's a last resort.
Right.
But if you don't have any other skill set, that becomes your last resort becomes your only resort.
Right. Right.
If you have about a hammer and a nail or something.
Yeah. If all you have is a hammer, everything becomes a nail. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yes.
So if people are interested in what you're doing, Brent, they can go to defenders-usa.com and look up your classes, right?
Yep.
And they are held in Colorado, Cameo?
Most of the time, I actually have Adam is hosting my Decisional Defender, so he can take it in Arizona in January too.
Cool. That'll be fun.
Maybe you should have me down in Montana sometime too.
You mean up in Montana?
Up, down, somewhere.
Yeah, that would be fun.
So everywhere is down for me.
Yeah. And so if somebody wanted to invite you to come to their range anywhere, they could get in touch with you, I assume.
Yeah, we're working on being able to free up that kind of scheduling too. So,
and you can find out more at defenders-usa.com about Brent, about his classes and all the other classes through Defenders USA. Any parting thoughts for the audience before we leave or anything that I missed, Brent?
As far as like your shooting journey or any journey you're on, don't let yourself get down if you're not, progressing at the rate that you think you should. Mm-hmm. Right? If you just keep at it, you'll eventually get there. And that kind of depends on, your physicality. Some people pick up stuff a lot quicker than others. Some people don't. Some people are a little bit slower to keep up. It just depends on your own body type and that kind of stuff. It just, wherever you are in your life, if you want a goal, pick small goals on the path to that big goal and you'll make it.
Yep. And it's helpful to find people who are also on that journey and or people that have been where you want to go. That's really important too, I think. Yep. Reach out for help, ask questions, be curious, buy the books, read the books. Don't just buy them, but read them. and reach out to those that can help. So awesome. Well, Brent, as always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you
for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.